No one notices the forgotten twin until someone powerful finally looks at her. The first thing I noticed was the flowers. Thousands of white roses draped across the ballroom like something out of a billionaire's fantasy, their soft perfume mixing with champagne and expensive perfume until the air itself felt heavy. Crystal chandeliers reflected gold light across the marble floors of the Grand Crescent Hotel, turning my twin sister's wedding into the kind of event people posted online with captions about fairy tales and perfect love. Olivia Whitmore had always loved attention. Tonight, she was glowing beneath it. I sat alone at table 17 near the back wall, close enough to hear the laughter but far enough to disappear inside it. Which, honestly, had been the story of my life for as long as I could remember. Can you believe Olivia booked this place for almost 200 grand? One bridesmaid whispered near the bar. Well, her fiancé's family owns half of Manhattan. They laughed softly. I stared down at the untouched glass of champagne in front of me and forced myself to smile. 26 years old, wearing a pale blue dress I bought on clearance 3 days ago, and somehow I still felt like the awkward little sister standing behind Olivia in every family photo, even though we were twins. Funny how one person could take all the sunlight in a room and leave the other freezing beside her. Across the ballroom, Olivia stood wrapped in satin and diamonds while guests circled around her like planets around the sun. My mother adjusted Olivia's veil for the 10th time that evening, her face glowing with pride. Dad laughed beside them with investors and politicians like tonight was some massive business victory instead of a wedding. Meanwhile, not one person had asked if I was okay sitting alone. Not one. My phone buzzed beside my plate. Ethan, didn't think you'd actually show up alone. A second text followed immediately. Ethan, you always did enjoy embarrassing yourself. My stomach twisted. I should have blocked him months ago. Instead, I locked my phone and slid it face down against the tablecloth, pretending my chest wasn't tightening. The string quartet shifted into another slow song, while couples moved toward the dance floor beneath golden lights. I reached for my water glass just to have something to do with my hands when Olivia suddenly glanced in my direction. For 1 second, our eyes met across the ballroom. She smiled politely, the kind of smile people gave strangers. Then she looked away, like I was invisible again. I swallowed hard and stood from the table before the pressure behind my ribs could become tears. I just needed air. 5 minutes outside. Maybe 10. Then I could survive the rest of the night pretending none of this hurt anymore. I moved toward the ballroom exit, heels sinking slightly into thick cream-colored carpet, when a woman in an emerald dress stepped directly into my path. Oh, she said loudly, glancing around with fake surprise. You're Olivia's twin, right? I forced a polite smile. Clara, right? Clara. Her eyes drifted toward the empty table behind me. Still single? Heat crawled up my neck. Excuse me. She laughed softly into her champagne flute. I just think it's sad. Your sister gets the dream wedding while you're sitting alone like someone forgot to invite you. A few nearby guests chuckled under their breath. My throat tightened instantly. Humiliation burned hotter than anger ever could. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could speak, the ballroom changed. I felt it before I saw it. Conversation slowed. Music suddenly seemed quieter. Heads turned toward the entrance all at once like something dangerous had just walked into the room. Then a deep voice behind me said calmly, "That's enough." The woman in the emerald dress went pale so fast, it almost looked painful. I turned slowly, my pulse suddenly pounding hard enough to shake my ribs, and every breath caught somewhere in my throat when I saw him standing there beneath the chandelier light. Damian Moretti. Even I knew that name. Everyone in New York did. Billionaire investor. Owner of Moretti Holdings. The kind of man people whispered about in expensive restaurants and boardrooms like he existed somewhere between power and myth. He stood at least 6'3" in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo that made every other man in the ballroom look unfinished. Dark hair brushed neatly back. Sharp jawline. Cold gray eyes that moved through people like they were temporary obstacles instead of human beings. But what unsettled me most was not how handsome he was. It was the silence around him. Entire conversations had stopped the moment he walked in. The woman beside me forced an awkward laugh. "Mr. Moretti, I was only joking." His expression did not change. "Then you should work on being funny." A few nearby guests immediately looked away into their champagne glasses. My face burned hotter. Part humiliation, Part disbelief. Damien finally looked at me directly, and the intensity of his gaze nearly knocked the air from my lungs. It felt strange being looked at that carefully, like he was noticing details other people skipped over. The nervous way I held my clutch bag too tightly. The fact my smile had disappeared. The faint shine in my eyes I was trying desperately to hide. "Dance with me," he said calmly. I blinked. "What?" His eyes never left mine. "You look like you need rescuing." The words should have embarrassed me. Instead, something deep inside my chest cracked quietly open. I heard the emerald dress woman inhale sharply beside me, while several guests openly stared now. Waiting, watching, judging. My instinct screamed at me to refuse. Men like Damien Moretti did not walk across ballrooms to save women like me. There was always a reason, always a cost. But then my eyes drifted toward Olivia across the room. She had noticed us now. So had my parents. And for the first time all night, they were not looking at my sister. They were looking at me. Damien extended his hand patiently. Strong fingers. Expensive watch catching gold light beneath his cuff. Calm. Controlled. Certain I would say yes. "Pretend you are with me," he said quietly enough that only I could hear. "That is all you have to do. Pretend." I almost laughed at the irony. I had spent my entire life pretending things did not hurt. Pretending being second place did not slowly hollow a person out from the inside. Pretending I did not notice how easily people forgot me standing beside Olivia. So maybe one more. Performance would not kill me. My hand trembled slightly as I placed it in his. Warmth wrapped around my fingers instantly. Firm. Steady. Safe. A strange word to associate with a man like Damien Moretti. The string quartet shifted into another slow song as he guided me toward the center of the ballroom. Every eye followed us. I could physically feel it. The whispers. The confusion. The sudden change in the air. Damien placed one hand lightly against my waist. Respectful, but possessive enough to make my heartbeat stumble. "Relax," he murmured. "You look terrified. Maybe because everyone is staring. Let them." His voice stayed calm, almost bored. People stare at things they cannot understand. I swallowed hard as we moved slowly beneath the chandeliers. Up close, he smelled faintly like cedarwood and expensive cologne. Clean. Sharp. Dangerous in a quiet way. "Why are you doing this?" I whispered. Damien looked down at me for one long second before answering. "Because," he said softly, "you were about to leave. There is something terrifying about being treated gently after years of being ignored." The thought hit me hard as Damien guided me across the ballroom floor like this was the most natural thing in the world. Like we had arrived together. Like his hand resting lightly against my waist belonged there. The string quartet played softly around us while golden light spilled across polished marble and crystal glasses. Every movement felt unreal. I could still feel people staring. Actually staring at me. Not through me. Not past me toward Olivia. Me. "You are shaking again," Damien murmured quietly. I forced a breath into my lungs. "This is insane." One corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Not quite a smile. "You are doing fine." Fine. The word almost made me laugh. My pulse was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. Across the ballroom, several businessmen had already approached my father, clearly asking questions about Damien. Questions about me. Dad looked stunned. Completely stunned. I had never seen that expression on his face before. Like he suddenly realized something valuable had been sitting unnoticed in front of him the entire time. Olivia, meanwhile, was no longer smiling naturally for the photographers. Her eyes kept drifting toward us between poses with her new husband. Confused. Irritated. Curious. I hated myself a little for noticing. Hated the tiny satisfaction blooming quietly inside my chest. Damien spun me slowly beneath the chandelier light with effortless control. "You dance well," he said. "I took lessons when I was younger." "For events like this?" "For Olivia." The words slipped out before I could stop them. His gaze sharpened slightly. I looked away. My mother thought identical twins should have identical skills. Olivia loved attention. I just learned how to follow. Silence stretched between us for a moment, but it did not feel awkward. Somehow it felt observant. Like Damien was carefully storing every word I said somewhere private. "And what did you want?" he asked finally. The question caught me off guard. "What? If nobody was telling you who to become," he said calmly, "what would you have chosen?" My throat tightened unexpectedly. No one had ever asked me that before. Not seriously. "Art school," I admitted softly. "Chicago. I got accepted after high school." Damien looked at me directly now. But I swallowed hard. Mom got sick. The music continued around us while memories pressed painfully against my ribs. Hospital hallways. Medical bills stacked on kitchen counters. Olivia crying because wedding planning stressed her out while I worked double shifts to help keep the lights on at home. Someone needed to stay, I said quietly. Olivia had internships in Europe. Dad said her future mattered more. The words sounded colder spoken out loud than they had inside my head all these years. Damien's expression did not change, but something darker settled behind his eyes. So you gave up yours. It was not a big deal. Do not lie to me. The words were calm, soft even, but they landed with enough force to stop my breath completely. I looked up at him too quickly. Damien held my gaze steadily. People only say something does not matter when they are trying to survive losing it. My chest physically hurt hearing that. Because he was right. God, he was right. Before I could answer, another voice interrupted us sharply. Clara. I froze instantly. Ethan stood beside the dance floor in a navy suit, one hand tucked casually into his pocket while his date clung to his arm. He smiled, but there was nothing kind in it. Wow, he said slowly, looking Damien up and down. Did not realize you upgraded this fast. Heat crawled into my face immediately. Damien did not even glance at him. And you are? Ethan's smile tightened slightly. Her ex. Damien finally turned his head. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Unfortunate for her, he said calmly. For one beautiful second, the entire ballroom looked embarrassed for him instead of me. Ethan's smirk disappeared almost instantly, while several guests nearby lowered their eyes into their drinks to hide their reactions. Damien did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The calm certainty in his tone hit harder than anger ever could. Ethan gave a short laugh that sounded forced. Right, he muttered. I walked into that one. His date shifted awkwardly beside him, clearly wishing she was somewhere else. I should have felt guilty watching him squirm. Instead, warmth spread slowly through my chest for the first time all night. Not because Damien humiliated him, because someone had finally chosen my side without hesitation. Ethan looked back at me. Clara, can I talk to you for a second? My stomach tightened immediately. Damien's hand remained steady against my waist. She is busy, he said smoothly. Ethan frowned slightly. This is between me and her. Damien finally looked at him again, expression unreadable. Then she can decide. The word surprised me enough that I looked up at him quickly. Most men I had dated either ignored my feelings completely or tried to make decisions for me. Damien somehow did neither. He simply waited. Calm. Controlled. Certain. Ethan sighed. Please. Just 30 seconds. I hesitated before nodding once. I will be right back. Damien studied my face for a moment like he was checking whether I actually wanted this. Then he stepped away slowly. I will be here. For simple words. But something about them settled my nerves immediately. Ethan guided me toward the quieter hallway outside the ballroom, where framed gold mirrors reflected soft candlelight along the walls. The music became muffled behind the closed doors, leaving only the distant sound of laughter and clinking champagne glasses. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. Okay, he said quietly. What is going on? Nothing is going on. Come on, Clara. He lowered his voice. That is Damien Moretti. I know who he is. Then you know men like that do not randomly dance with women they just met. His words landed harder than he intended, because part of me had been wondering the exact same thing since Damien walked into my life 40 minutes ago. Ethan stepped closer carefully. Look, maybe I was rude earlier. I crossed my arms. Maybe. He exhaled sharply. Fine. I was rude. But seeing you with him is strange, okay? Why? Because you were never. He stopped himself too late. My chest tightened instantly. Never what? Ethan looked away for half a second before answering. You were never the type of girl men like him notice. The hallway suddenly felt colder. There it was. The truth people never said directly, but always implied. Olivia was the beautiful twin. The magnetic one. The unforgettable one. And me? I was dependable. Quiet. Easy to overlook. Ethan must have seen the hurt flash across my face because his expression softened slightly. That came out wrong. No, I whispered. It came out honest. Silence stretched painfully between us. Then he sighed again. Look, Clara, I just do not want you getting hurt. A bitter laugh escaped my throat before I could stop it. You lost the right to warn me about pain when you left me for someone with richer parents. Ethan flinched visibly. Good. Finally. That is not fair. Is it not? My voice cracked slightly despite how hard I fought to keep it steady. You spent 3 years telling me you loved me while secretly wishing I was someone easier to show off. He opened his mouth to respond, but another voice interrupted quietly from the end of the hallway. There you are. I turned instantly. Damien stood beneath the dim golden lights with one hand in his pocket, his dark tuxedo, perfectly untouched despite the chaos he had caused simply by entering the room. Calm gray eyes moved once from Ethan to me, assessing, reading everything. Then his gaze settled fully on my face. Your sister is about to cut the cake, he said softly. And your mother is panicking because she cannot find you. I blinked in surprise. How did you know that? One corner of his mouth lifted faintly. Your mother has asked 3 different staff members where her missing daughter went. Missing daughter. The words hit somewhere deep inside me because nobody had searched for me like that in years. Damien extended his hand toward me again. Come back inside with me, Clara. The dangerous thing about kindness is that once you finally feel it, you realize how starved you have been. I stared at Damien's outstretched hand for half a second too long before placing mine in his again. Warmth immediately closed around my fingers, steady and grounding in a way that made my chest ache unexpectedly. Ethan looked frustrated watching it happen, maybe even regretful. But Damien did not spare him another glance. Whatever power surrounded that man, it came from certainty. He never competed for attention. He simply assumed he already owned the room. As we walked back toward the ballroom together, the soft glow from crystal sconces reflected against polished black marble floors, while distant music drifted through the hotel corridors. I became painfully aware of how close Damien was beside me, not in an overwhelming way, in a protective one, like nobody would dare embarrass me while he was near. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it made me feel strangely safe. You did not have to come looking for me, I said quietly. Damien adjusted the cuff of his tuxedo calmly. You looked unhappy. Most people would not notice. Most people are distracted. His answer came instantly. No hesitation. No performance. Just truth. We stepped back into the ballroom, and the noise hit me immediately. Laughter. Glasses clinking. Camera flashes exploding near the massive white wedding cake positioned beneath hanging orchids in the center of the room. But the second guests noticed Damien return. With me beside him, conversations shifted again. Heads turned. Women whispered behind manicured hands. Men straightened their jackets nervously. I felt it all pressing against my skin. There she is, my mother exclaimed suddenly, hurrying toward us with visible relief. Her silver earrings caught the ballroom lights as she approached. Clara, where have you been? Everyone is waiting for family photos. Then she finally noticed who was standing beside me. Her entire expression changed. Mr. Moretti. Damien nodded politely. Mrs. Whitmore. Mom blinked quickly, clearly startled he knew her name. I did not realize you and Clara were acquainted. We met tonight, Damien said smoothly. Your daughter rescued me from a very boring conversation. I stared at him in disbelief. He said it so naturally, so effortlessly. Mom actually laughed softly, looking almost flustered. I could not remember the last time I had seen my mother nervous around me. Well, she said quickly, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her dress. We are honored you could attend Olivia's wedding. Damien's expression remained calm. The honor seems to belong to everyone else. Before Mom could respond, Olivia appeared beside us in layers of white satin and diamonds, her smile perfectly polished for nearby photographers. But the moment her eyes landed on Damien standing next to me, something flickered behind her expression. Surprise first, then calculation. Clara, she said lightly, you disappeared. I just needed air. Olivia's gaze moved slowly between me and Damien. Apparently, you found something more interesting. Her tone sounded teasing to everyone else. But I knew my sister too well. She was assessing the situation the same way she evaluated luxury brands or social connections. Determining value. Determining status. Damien extended his hand toward her politely. Congratulations on your wedding. Olivia smiled instantly as she shook it. Thank you. I have heard so much about you. Hopefully nothing too accurate. That earned a genuine laugh from her. Cameras flashed nearby again while guests subtly moved closer, pretending not to eavesdrop. Olivia tilted her head slightly toward me. I did not know you two were together. There it was. The question everyone wanted answered. I opened my mouth, unsure what to say, but Damien answered first. We are getting to know each other. The words hit me harder than they should have. Not because they meant anything real. They did not. This was still pretending. Still temporary. But hearing someone like Damien Moretti say those words while looking directly at me made something dangerous begin unfolding quietly inside my chest. Olivia smiled again, but this time it looked tighter around the edges. Interesting, she said softly. Then her new husband called her toward the cake table, and she stepped away gracefully beneath another storm of camera flashes. My mother immediately leaned toward me the second Olivia disappeared. Clara, she whispered urgently. Do you have any idea who that man is? I looked up at Damien just as he glanced down at me. Calm gray eyes. Controlled expression. But for the first time all night, I noticed something else there too. Interest. Real interest. And somehow that frightened me more than anything. It is a dangerous feeling when the most powerful man in the room looks at you like you are the only person he actually sees. I tried to ignore the thought, while photographers gathered everyone around the towering wedding cake beneath cascading white orchids and golden lights. The ballroom buzzed with forced elegance now. Too many smiles. Too many whispers. Too many people suddenly pretending they had always remembered my name. Damien stood beside me with one hand resting casually in his pocket, while servers carried silver trays of champagne through the crowd. Calm. Untouchable. Every few minutes another businessman approached him nervously, eager to shake his hand or steal 30 seconds of his attention. He handled all of them the same way. Polite, brief, distant. But every single time, his eyes drifted back toward me afterward, like he was checking whether I was still there. Family only for the next photo. The photographer called loudly. Olivia immediately linked arms with her husband while my parents moved closer beneath the chandelier lights. I stepped back automatically already, prepared to disappear to the edge of the room again like I always did during family events. Then Damien's voice stopped me. You are not in the picture? I glanced toward him awkwardly. It is really more for immediate family. His expression barely changed. You are her twin sister. Yes, but Olivia usually prefers. I stopped myself too late. Prefers being the center of everything. Prefers cleaner photos. Prefers me somewhere less noticeable. Damien studied me for one long second before speaking quietly. You apologize for yourself constantly. Has anyone ever told you that? The words hit too close to something fragile inside me. I looked away quickly. You do not know me well enough to analyze me. I know enough. Before I could answer, my mother suddenly waved me over impatiently. Clara, hurry up. We are starting. I moved toward the cake display while camera flashes exploded around us in bursts of white light. Olivia stood glowing beside her husband with perfect posture and practiced grace. She had always been beautiful effortlessly, the kind of beauty that made strangers softer around her. I took my usual position near the edge of the family arrangement, careful not to block anyone important. Then Damien walked directly toward us. Every conversation nearby seemed to lower instantly. Even the photographer looked startled. Mr. Moretti, my father said quickly, almost breathless. Would you like a photo with the bride and groom? Damien glanced briefly at Olivia before his eyes settled on me. I was actually hoping for one with Clara. Silence. Complete silence. My heartbeat stumbled so hard it physically hurt. Olivia blinked once. My mother froze beside the cake table. Even the photographer looked confused. With Clara? Mom repeated. Damien nodded calmly. If she does not mind. I could feel dozens of eyes landing on me at once, waiting for my reaction. Waiting to understand why a man like Damien Moretti seemed suddenly fascinated by the daughter nobody usually noticed. My voice almost failed me completely. Damien stepped closer until only I could hear him over the music and camera shutters. Breathe, Clara. His tone was low, gentle. Somehow that made everything worse, because nobody had spoken to me carefully like that in years. I nodded once, unable to trust my voice, and moved beside him while the photographer adjusted the lighting. Damien rested one hand lightly against the small of my back for the photo. Respectful, steady, but intimate enough that murmurs immediately spread through the ballroom again. Perfect, the photographer said excitedly. Look at each other. I turned toward Damien reluctantly and instantly regretted it because he was already looking at me, not smiling, not performing for cameras. Just watching me with that same unreadable intensity that kept unraveling pieces of me all night. The flash exploded. One picture, then another. And somehow standing there beneath the gold light beside the most powerful man I had ever met, I realized something terrifying. For the first time in my life, Olivia was no longer the person everyone was staring at. The cruelest thing about finally being noticed is realizing how invisible you were before. The camera flashes kept bursting around us while guests whispered openly now, no longer even trying to hide their curiosity. I stood beside Damien near the dance floor, still feeling the warmth of his hand against my back long after the photographer moved on to the next group picture. Across the ballroom, I caught several women staring at me with thin smiles and narrowed eyes. Not because they suddenly liked me, because they were trying to figure out what a man like Damien Moretti saw in someone like me. Honestly, I was wondering the same thing. "You are thinking too loudly again," Damien said quietly beside me. I looked up too fast. What does that even mean? One faint corner of his mouth lifted. "It means your face gives away every emotion." Heat crawled instantly into my cheeks. "That sounds unfortunate." "I disagree." His voice stayed calm, but there was something warmer underneath it now. Something dangerously close to amusement. Before I could respond, the ballroom lights dimmed slightly and soft piano music floated through the speakers. Olivia and her husband stepped onto the center dance floor for their first dance while guests gathered around, them holding champagne glasses beneath the gold glow of chandeliers. Everyone looked enchanted. Everyone except me. I watched Olivia smiling up at her husband while memories pressed quietly against my ribs. Olivia getting accepted into private schools while I stayed home to help mom after surgeries. Olivia flying to Paris for internships while I worked at a coffee shop 12 hours a day. Olivia falling in love while I learned how to survive being forgotten. "You love her," Damien said suddenly. The statement caught me off guard. "Of course I do. She is my sister." Even after all this, I hesitated. The truth sat heavily inside my chest. Loving someone and feeling hurt by them can exist at the same time. Damien went silent beside me for a moment. Then he nodded once slowly like he understood that better than I realized. The piano music swelled through the ballroom, while couples drifted toward the dance floor around Olivia and her husband. Guests laughed softly. Crystal glasses clinked. Expensive perfume mixed with white roses and candle wax in the warm air. It should have felt magical. Instead, exhaustion suddenly crashed over me all at once. Emotional exhaustion. The kind that builds quietly for years until one small moment finally cracks something open. "I need a minute," I whispered. Damien immediately looked down at me. "Are you all right?" "Just overwhelmed." His eyes searched my face carefully before he nodded once. "Balcony is quieter." I blinked slightly. "How did you know I was going there?" "Because that is where people go when they are trying not to fall apart in public." The honesty in his answer hit me harder than comfort would have. I slipped away from the ballroom before anyone could stop me, pushing open the glass doors leading onto the terrace overlooking Manhattan. Cool night air immediately wrapped around my skin, carrying the distant sound of traffic 11 stories below. The city glittered endlessly beneath the dark sky. Beautiful. Lonely. I gripped the balcony railing tightly and inhaled slowly, trying to steady the pressure building behind my eyes. I hated crying. Especially here. Especially tonight. "Careful," Olivia's voice said softly. Behind me. "People might think the wedding is upsetting you." I closed my eyes briefly before turning around. She stood near the doorway in white satin and diamonds, still perfect under the terrace lights. But her expression looked sharper now, less polished. "I just needed air," I said quietly. Olivia crossed her arms lightly. Interesting choice of timing. I frowned slightly. What is that supposed to mean? She looked back toward the ballroom, where Damien was visible through the glass, speaking with investors near the bar. "You know exactly what I mean." Something cold settled slowly into my stomach. "Olivia." She laughed softly, but there was no warmth in it. "Come on, Clara. Do you really think a man like Damien Moretti suddenly became fascinated with you for no reason?" The problem with old wounds is that the right words can reopen all of them at once. Olivia's voice stayed soft beneath the Manhattan night skyline, but every sentence landed like a blade sliding carefully between my ribs. I stared at her across the terrace while cold wind tugged lightly at the loose strands of her blonde hair. She still looked flawless. Of course she did. Olivia always looked flawless. "I do not know what you are talking about," I said quietly, though even I could hear the weakness in my voice. Olivia tilted her head slightly. "Really?" She glanced through the glass ballroom doors toward Damien again. Men like him do not randomly notice women sitting alone at weddings. Heat rose instantly into my face. Shame, embarrassment, fear. The worst part was that some small broken part of me already believed her. Olivia stepped closer in her white satin gown, lowering her voice. Clara, I am trying to help you. I almost laughed at that. By humiliating me? By warning you. Her eyes softened slightly, but not enough to feel kind. You get emotionally attached too fast. You always have. The words hit harder because they were not entirely false. I had spent most of my life loving people harder than they loved me back. Family, Ethan, friends who only remembered me when they needed something. Maybe Olivia knew that. Maybe she always had. Damien Moretti lives in a completely different world, she continued carefully. Men like him like attention, mystery, control. Tonight probably entertained him. My throat tightened painfully. Why does this bother you so much? For the first time, something sharp flashed openly across her face. There it was, the crack beneath the perfect bride smile. Because this is my wedding, she snapped softly. And suddenly everybody is talking about you. Silence crashed between us. The city lights blurred faintly beyond the balcony railings while music drifted through the glass doors behind Olivia. I stared at my sister and realized something painful. She was not angry because Damien noticed me. She was angry because everyone else noticed me after he did. You really hate this, I whispered. Olivia crossed her arms tighter. Do not be dramatic. You cannot stand not being the center of attention for one night. Her expression hardened instantly. That is not fair. Is it not? Emotion rose too fast inside my chest now. Years of swallowed feelings pushing upward all at once. You got everything, Olivia. My voice cracked despite how hard I fought to steady it. Every opportunity, every compliment, every dream. And I spent years convincing myself that was okay because at least one of us was happy. Olivia looked stunned for half a second, then defensive. Nobody forced you to give things up. I stared at her in disbelief. Mom was sick, and I was supposed to ruin my future too? The sentence hit so hard I physically stepped back. Wind swept across the terrace again, while tears burned painfully behind my eyes. Olivia noticed immediately and sighed in frustration. Oh my God, Clara, do not cry right now. That did it. Not the cruelty, not the jealousy. That sentence. Because suddenly I was 16 again, crying quietly in hospital bathrooms so Mom would not feel guilty. 20 years old, smiling while Olivia celebrated Paris internships I could not afford anymore. 24, pretending Ethan leaving me did not destroy what little confidence I had left. I was exhausted. Completely exhausted from making myself smaller so everyone else could shine brighter. You know what? I whispered shakily. For one night, someone looked at me first. And you cannot handle it. Olivia opened her mouth immediately, but another voice interrupted behind us. Calm, cold, dangerous. She should not have to apologize for existing. My breath caught instantly. Olivia froze. Damien stood in the open terrace doorway with one hand in his pocket, gray eyes fixed entirely on my sister now. His expression remained controlled, but something about the stillness around him suddenly felt lethal in the quietest possible way. Olivia straightened quickly. I did not realize you were listening. That was not intentional, Damien said smoothly. But I do not regret hearing the truth. My pulse pounded violently as his gaze finally shifted toward me. The second he saw the tears in my eyes, his expression changed. Not dramatically, somehow worse. Colder, more focused, like someone had just crossed a line he did not tolerate. Then he walked directly toward me and held out his hand one more time. Come with me, Clara. Some people spend their entire lives waiting for someone to choose them without hesitation. I stared at Damien's outstretched hand while cold Manhattan air moved softly across the terrace, and suddenly I realized I had been waiting too. Maybe forever. Olivia stood frozen near the balcony doors, white satin catching the warm ballroom lights behind her. But for the first time in our lives, nobody was looking at her. Not really. Damien's attention stayed completely on me. Steady, certain, protective in a way that made my chest ache. I swallowed hard and placed my hand in his. His fingers closed gently around mine before he guided me back toward the ballroom without another word to my sister. That somehow felt worse than anger. Olivia was used to attention, used to reactions. Damien gave her neither. As we stepped back inside, The noise of the wedding rushed around us instantly again. Music, laughter, champagne glasses clinking beneath crystal chandeliers. But the second guest noticed Damien walking beside me with his hand still holding mine. Conversations shifted once more. I felt eyes following us across the marble floor. Curious, confused, jealous. "Are you okay?" Damien asked, quietly. The question nearly undid me all over again. Nobody had asked me that tonight without expecting something in return. "I do not know," I admitted honestly. He nodded slowly, like honesty mattered more to him than polished answers. Near the center of the ballroom, several investors immediately approached Damien again, eager for conversation now that the wedding reception had become more relaxed. One older man laughed loudly while adjusting his cufflinks. "Moretti, you disappeared for half the evening. We thought you escaped." Damien's expression remained calm. I found better company. The men chuckled politely, but their attention quickly shifted toward me. Assessing. Curious. One of them smiled warmly. "And who is this?" Before I could stumble through an awkward answer, Damien spoke smoothly. "Clara Whitmore. Not just Clara. Not Olivia's sister. Not an afterthought hidden at the edge of family photos." He said my full name like it mattered. The older investor nodded politely. "Pleasure meeting you, Miss Whitmore." More greetings followed after that. Real greetings. People shaking my hand, asking questions about my work, my interests, my life. It felt surreal, like stepping into an alternate universe where I had always been visible. But the strangest part was realizing Damien never once interrupted me while I answered. He simply stood beside me, quiet and observant, allowing space for me to exist fully on my own. That realization settled somewhere deep inside my chest. Across the ballroom, I noticed Ethan watching us from the bar with a distant expression while his date scrolled through her phone beside him looking bored. Nearby, my parents were surrounded by guests suddenly eager to discuss their other daughter. The irony almost hurt. But Olivia stood completely still near the cake table, her champagne untouched now. She looked beautiful, perfect, yet somehow smaller than before. Not because anyone humiliated her, because for one night, she was not the center of gravity anymore. Damien leaned slightly closer beside me. "You are leaving soon," he said quietly. I blinked in surprise. "How did you know that?" "You keep looking at the exit." I let out a soft breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "Maybe I am overwhelmed." "You are." His honesty made me smile despite myself. The first real smile all night. Damien noticed immediately. Something subtle shifted in his expression then. Softer. Interested in a way that suddenly felt dangerous again. "There it is," he murmured. "What?" "The version of you that stops apologizing for taking up space." My chest tightened painfully around the words. Before I could answer, the wedding band transitioned into a slower song while guests drifted back toward the dance floor beneath warm golden lights. Damien looked at me for one quiet second before holding out his hand again. "One last dance before you run away?" I should have said no. Nothing about tonight made sense anymore. Powerful men did not notice women like me. Fairy tale moments did not happen to forgotten twins sitting alone at weddings. And yet Damien Moretti was standing in front of me looking at me like I was something rare, something worth finding. I placed my hand in his slowly while my pulse stumbled hard against my ribs again. Then he pulled me gently closer beneath the chandelier light and whispered something that made my entire world stop. "You still do not remember me, Clara, do you?"